I'd left school with no job to go to and exam results that my teachers said could get me to any university anywhere in the world if I had the money. I mentioned the sum to my father and he laughed. The bank managers I went to didn't laugh, not, at least not in my face. They asked for equity, then my family name. I gave them my mother's. They pointed out how generous they were by giving me their time, then nodded at the door. I went south to the drylands where the hotels were. For 2 tourist seasons, I peeled back my lips and exposed my teeth, served drinks barefoot in a rainbow-colored synthetic shirt, wide-brimmed straw hat, and pantaloons which no Kamaho man would be seen dead in outside of Beach Bum Bar. Then a half-drunk old man from Germany, red like a barbecued lobster, closed his hand around my crotch and I punched him in the face. The Englishman who owned the place leaned in close and demanded I apologize, else he fired me without pay. I told him to haul his ass and walked. I took to the sidewalk of St. Andrews, watching the tourists, the pretty cars, the office girls stepping in heels that raised their asses almost as high as their ears, and young men shuffling bow-legged in waistless trousers with rappers' caps and speaking in made-up American accents. I watched especially the bright, open faces of the little boys in school uniforms heading home every afternoon to parents who might someday laugh at them. I didn't doubt that they would end up like me, with their shoulders propping up a storefront in St. Andrews. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, it happened right in front of me. A huddle of young men arguing over something. I paid them little mind. They were wharf rats who made a living begging money from the tourists. When the ocean liners weren't in, they drifted around the town, pulling at the skirts of schoolgirls and pushing their pelvises against them. Many parents waited at the school gates and escorted their daughters home. A single protesting voice rose up from their midst, pitched high and desperate, heads turned, followed by a patter of fast-approaching feet. Market people loved a fight. There came a flare of voices from the knot of hooligans. I heard the word respect, then fuck up, then fucker, then a thud like a fist sinking into a pillow. A gasp followed by the rapid scattering of feet as the young men fanned out, adjusted their hoods over their heads and sprinted off. A boy lay on the sidewalk in the same uniform I wore to school for 7 years. He was laid out on his side, right arm curled in front of his stomach, the other bent at the elbow, was under his head as if he were asleep. I followed the red trickle that seeped from under his hand, its abrupt change of course as it met the invisible incline of the concrete gutter and flowed into it. I thought I knew the boy. I felt I ought to. An office girl with a tight, high bun of expensive Indian hair, nails glittering gold in the sun, brought her phone to her ear, her arms making a delicate, stylish curve just before she spoke into it. I watched her crimson lips moving. I walked across the road, knelt and touched the boy's forehead. I stood up, ignoring the shock on all those faces fixed on me. They were reading me. I knew, studying my expression, waiting perhaps for the howl that would confirm for them that this dead boy was family. I did no such thing. I simply stood over him. When the police came, they rushed me. The largest one slammed my back against the wall, jammed a knee into my stomach, and pressed an elbow against my throat. I choked on my breath and held his eyes. He did not like that. He threw me on the pavement, dropped his weight on my spine, then dragged my hands behind my back and handcuffed me. A little car arrived. It stopped in the middle of the road. An apparition got out. A white head of hair, eyes like two knobs of flaming coals, lips that would look perfect on a battered leathered purse. White hair shouted something. The words came out of him like gravel on a grater. The weight came off my back. I was lifted to my feet, the handcuffs removed. Rough hands bundled me into the little car. All the while, people were out there protesting at my arrest. All women, the men remained silent. They were no doubt less interested in my fate than in the way injustice takes its course. It made for better rum shop conversations. They took me to an old brick building backing the bus terminal, which stood over the sea. Above the entrance, in big white type, St. Andrews Police Central. Amid the thunder of vehicles arriving in the concrete courtyard, White Hair sat me down in a chair by an untidy desk. He pressed a sandwich into my hand and a glass of orange juice. He lowered himself in front of me and jabbed a finger at his chest. Detective Superintendent Chillman, you? Digger, I said. That's the name on your birth certificate? Michael Dixon, I said. How long you been out there? Out where? On the street. I have a home, I told him. How long? Well, 18 months, 3 days. You been counting? Why? To keep my sanity, I said. He looked at me in the eye. You still got it? You got no basis for arresting me. Calm down, young man. You're not under arrest. No, talk to me. What happened? I pushed aside the sandwich and sipped the juice. Well, monkeys demanding respect from humans, I said. They killed a human. Detective Superintendent Chillman leaned forward and squinted as if he were examining a speck in my eye. You upset? That's good. You could point them out? They hide their faces from the beginning, before the argument. It's obvious they planned it. Chillman rubbed his chin and looked up at the ceiling. Right, he said, rising to his feet. Come with me. He stopped at the door and raised his voice. Okay, fellas, bring them out. 23 young men, all in rappers' hoods rolled back from their heads, filed out of 3 vans into the yard. Some looked nervous, some angry, most of them relaxed. A few were so terrified they could barely walk. A couple of them didn't drop the monkey swagger. The officers lined them up against the wall of the building. Chillman prodded me. You recognize any? I shook my head. Okay, let's try something else then. On his word, Chillman's officers pulled the hoods over the young men's head and ordered them to run across the yard. Chillman looked at me. Anything? A few of the youths threw threatening glares in my direction. I squared my shoulders and glared back. Make them talk, I said. Let each one of them say something. An officer grumbled under his breath and sucked his teeth, the same one who'd flattened me on the sidewalk. Chillman leaned into my face. I caught a whiff of rum. Listen, young fella, I will make them son of a bitch across this skin form and walk upside down on one finger if I have to, because I want a result, you understand? I want a result right now. So don't play the ass with me if that is what you're doing. Beneath the tired old face, he was seething. He was so full of fury, I felt myself leaning away from him. I had never seen such rage in another human. And still, when he turned to address the young man, his tone was conversational. This is the way I see it, gentlemen. I could let every one of you all walk out of here scot-free. I could do that right now and turn my back. But you all wouldn't get far. People out there know who've been arrested. That's why I ordered these officers to stand you all together in the market square and give the whole damn town a good look at your face. I know for sure that word already reached the brothers and the sisters and the uncles and the cousins. They don't know which one of you just murdered their boy child. They won't want to know. All they'll want is blood. Your blood. As much of it as they can get until they're satisfied. They'll come after every one of you. My job is to prevent that. So, one by one, you say your names and where you live exactly. Young fella, you ready? He turned to me. I nodded and pressed my back against the old white vehicle. I closed my eyes while the boys shouted their names and coordinates, and I relived the heat of the afternoon, the sound of oncoming vehicles, and the heavy fruit and earth smell of the marketplace, the hot pitch of words, the exact timbre and inflections of their voices. You see, I have that kind of memory. I picked out every one of them. 8. One was missing. It was easy afterwards. They had betrayed themselves by pointing at each other. When it was over, Chillman's hot eyes were on my face. The old fellow was smiling. He pointed at the sandwich. I know you're hungry. Eat. He lowered his voice, his eyes still probing. Ever been arrested before today or charged for anything? He must have seen the irritation on my face. Sorry, young fella, I have to ask the questions. I got up to leave. He pushed out a stiff hand. You're not leaving right now. Detective Superintendent Chillman led me back to his office and sat me on a chair in the corner nearest the door. Officers in plain clothes crisscrossed the uneven wooden floor, and from time to time, one of them stopped and placed his mouth against Chillman's ear. The old fellow's lips barely moved when he replied. All I could hear was the throaty rattle of his voice. Occasionally, I caught his eyes on me, a steady coal-fire gaze I pretended not to notice. He said something to an elderly woman who sat in the middle of the room under a big white ceiling fan. 2 girls in swivel chairs on either side of her desk were stapling papers and slipping them into light green folders. When the old man straightened up, the women's eyes took me in briefly, then slipped away. Because of that look, I felt my heartbeat quicken. Chillman came over to me. You want to know? Know what? I said. The little boy's name is Ryan Weeks. His mother's working her ass off in the Nutmeg Pool in St. John's to give him an education. Only child. You understand what that means? I stood up. You finished with me? You're telling me you don't care? It don't concern you? I don't have anything to do with this. I raised my voice. The office fell silent, a slow turning of heads in my direction, expressionless faces. Chillman showed me a row of yellow teeth. That's not the way I see it, young man. You were there, like all the other citizens who stand up like jackass in the middle of the government road and watch 8 hardened-back ramgoats gang up on a little child and murder him. That makes you a witness. At least, prime. I could make it worse. I could say that you were handling the body when we got there. That's tampering with evidence. And if that doesn't stick, I could get you for loitering. He patted my arm and winked. I will let you go home, but not before you tell me where you live. I'll stop here.